Florida takes on Missouri. Will Anthony Richardson need to overcome the Gators defense? Next on Read and Reaction, the articles. Hey, everybody, this is Will Miles with Read and Reaction. Just a reminder, you can get the written version of all these articles over at readandreaction.com. We're putting this up here on YouTube, so that if you don't want to read it, just want to listen to it, you can get that here. The clips that are in the article will be over at readandreaction.com. Can't get those up on YouTube, at least not at this time, but hopefully we'll be able to do that in the future. But anyway, we really appreciate you supporting us here. Certainly like, subscribe, share with your friends, but that really helps us if you like and subscribe here on YouTube. If you go over to the article on the website, please click on the advertisements there. That helps us out as well. And then, hey, if you want to do a little bit more, get a little bit more content, you can go over and check us out, patreon.com/readandreaction. I'm writing a 5 things article that's going up there now, hopefully on a weekly basis. It's just going to sort of talk about my take on a few things within the program that's extra that you can't get on the website, can't get on YouTube. And so you can check that out over there. So with that, let's gonna go ahead and get on to the article. Florida takes on Missouri. According to ESPN, Florida goes into its game against Missouri as an 11-point favorite. That's pretty aggressive considering Florida is averaging 27.3 points per game versus its non-Eastern Washington opponents. But Missouri's offense is bad, ranking 82nd in the country. Anthony Richardson has turned his season around with stellar performances against Tennessee and the aforementioned Eagles. And Missouri is traveling to Gainesville in a game that was the end of the Dan Mullen era, but certainly not the low point last year. Does any of that matter? Well, in some ways, this is a matchup of the unstoppable force and the immovable object. Florida's strength is definitely its offense, which is weird to say after that Kentucky game. But Missouri's defense ranks 25th in yards per play allowed in 2022 thus far. Conversely, the Gators defense ranks 110th nationally in yards per play allowed and dead last in the SEC in just about every defensive category. But Missouri's offense is bad, particularly through the air, where it's ranked 103rd in yards per pass attempt. Something is going to have to give. So that's the question we're trying to answer in this preview. Which bad unit will improve enough, or which unit is futile enough for the other to take advantage to tilt the scales in one direction or another? Missouri quarterback. I think it's safe to say after 5 games that Brady Cook is not playing well. His quarterback rating for the season is 128.4, well below average. The only time that rating has been above 123 is in games against Louisiana Tech, 134, and Abilene Christian, 184.8. If you take away those games, his QB rating sinks to 106.3. His yards above replacement, my proprietary stat for measuring a quarterback's success through the air and ground, is negative 0.51 for the season. So even though Cook has some dual threat ability, it hasn't been enough to overcome his futility through the air. Additionally, if you take away those 2 performances against Louisiana Tech and Abilene Christian, his yard sinks to negative 1.79, which is really, really bad. If we look at the film of Cook against Missouri's better opponents, we start to see why this is so. This play should be a touchdown. Kansas State has loaded the box, and Missouri is running a run-pass option. The deep safety is the read. If he drops into coverage, Cook comes off his slot receiver and throws the hitch to the receiver up top. If he comes up to help with the run, Kansas State doesn't have anybody deep, and the slant to the slot receiver is wide open. There isn't any pressure. Cook just misses the throw. You don't get these kinds of chances all that often, so you have to hit them when you get them. He hasn't hit them much this year. But what if he has to come off of his first read? Well, that was an issue against Kansas State. Cook doesn't get the coverage he's expecting on this play. Kansas State has one deep safety, but right at the snap, the corner at the top of the screen bails backwards, and the safety who is playing up in the box heads over to the space vacated by the corner. The linebackers drop into zone coverage. At the snap, we can see Cook looking to his left. He was looking for likely some sort of hitch or out route at the sticks, but the zone means that there are linebackers underneath that throw. He rightly doesn't throw it that way, but he doesn't get to a second read, because if he did, he'd notice his receiver, Luther Burden, number 3, coming open across the middle for a first down. Instead, Cook bails from the pocket early, even though his offensive line has done a decent job of protecting him, and tries to run for the first down. He actually runs right behind Burden on the try and ends up short of the first down. This isn't an isolated incident. On this next play, Kansas State only rushes 3 defensive linemen. None of them win their battles, and Cook has a great pocket to throw from. The clip doesn't show whether anyone's open downfield, but he needs to know that his running back is available for a check down. The reason I say that is because the Wildcats only rush 3 here, and their linebackers fall deep into a zone. The minute that happens, the running back doesn't have any blocking responsibilities and leaks out into the flat. It's 1st and 10, so Cook had a 5-yard gain easily, and potentially more if the running back could make the defender in the flat miss. Instead, Cook tried to run the ball and was sacked for a 1-yard loss. And those might be good outcomes from Missouri because it looks like you can confuse Cook if you make changes to your coverage post-snap, even if he sees it coming. This is a longer clip, so you can see the defensive configuration. Kansas State has 3 men deep, but walks the linebacker up into the box late. Cook sees it and calls a check. What he doesn't see is that the corner at the top of the screen backs away off of his receiver, indicating that he's going to drop deep into coverage. Cook thinks he has cover too because of the 2 deep safeties. That would mean that the middle of the field is open. But the corner dropping means Kansas State is actually in a quarters coverage. Each corner takes a fourth of the field, and the 2 safeties take the middle, which means he's throwing right into the teeth of the defense. This is the same run pass option from before, and when Cook sees the linebacker come up, he thinks he's going to have an open throw down the middle. Instead, he leaves the throw short, and it turns into a pretty easy interception into double coverage. Florida defense. So can the Gators defense take advantage of some of Cook's limitations? Well, I actually think there is reason to think so. The first reason is that Patrick Toney asks his defense to create confusion without sacrificing coverage on the back end. The way he often does that is by dropping a defensive end into coverage. On this play, Justice Boone isn't even blocked and has a free run at Kentucky quarterback Will Levis. But why does he have that free run? It's because linebacker Ventrell Miller blitzes while Brenton Cox falls into coverage. The Kentucky offensive line completely screws this up and allows Boone to come free, which exposes Levis. But this is really similar to the play where Cook took off on the first down above. The Gators were in his zone, and Levis was going to have to come off of it and find his check down had Boone been picked up correctly. I'm not sure Cook is going to be able to do that. The other reason is that Florida has been able to move quarterbacks off their spots. I know that fans will remember this play as the play Brenton Cox should have made against Tennessee. But the reality is that this would not have been a huge play had Cox gotten, or had this would have been a huge play had Cox not gotten the pressure. Safety Trey Dean is completely turned around right as Hooker hits the last step of his drop. It's a heck of a play by Hooker to sidestep Cox, but even more impressive that he kept his eyes downfield. Dean isn't able to recover in time, but Cox almost gave him enough time, and it ends up a 10-yard gain. That's exactly what Tennessee needed at the time. But again, I question whether Cook will be able to make the adjustments that Hooker made if he's forced to move in the pocket in this sort of situation. Or will he revert to running like he did against Kansas State? Florida quarterback. The warts of the Mississippi quarterback are clearly there, but Florida's quarterback isn't without his warts as well. Richardson has been a roller coaster this season with either really bad performances, a YAR of negative 1.11 versus USF and negative 3.62 versus Kentucky, or really good ones, a YAR of 1.44 versus Utah, 1.88 versus Tennessee, and 18.44 versus Eastern Washington. If the good AR shows up against Missouri on Saturday, I'm not sure there's a lot that the Tigers are going to be able to do to stop the Gators. Overall, Richardson has been much better than Cook, QB rating of 128.2, but a YAR of 1.11. But that changes considerably when you take away the Eastern Washington performance, down to a 111.7 and negative 0.07. Basically, Richard's performances are why statisticians have jobs. His average geometric mean performance is right around average without the Eastern Washington game. But the standard deviation of those performances, i.e. the variability in his play, changes drastically from week to week. Why is that? Well, I think it has to do with the speed of the game. The game is starting to slow down for Richardson. You can tell by looking how he progressed just between the game against USF and the game against Tennessee. On this play, USF drops 7 into his own coverage. When Richardson hits the last step of his drop, nobody is open, and USF has 3 defensive backs deep behind them. There just isn't anywhere to go with the ball unless Richardson finds his outlet, the running back leaking out of the backfield. This mimics the play I showed for Cook up above, and the minute Richardson saw the coverage, he needed to check the ball down. So what did he do against Tennessee? It's basically the same coverage, although Tennessee was dropping back further. You could see Trevor Etienne, number 7, begging for the ball at the top of the screen. But Richardson learned his lesson. If the opposition is playing zone, where's my check down? He completely turns his body to deliver the ball to Chekhow Bowman. This is simple, but it's the simple stuff that throws Richardson off track. He can make the explosive plays. The question is, can he make the simple ones? He's starting to do that more often. Takeaway. None of us know what to expect on Saturday. I didn't preview the Missouri defense with any clips because if good Anthony Richardson shows up, the Tigers aren't going to be able to stop the Gators offense. If there aren't any coverage busts for the Gators defense, this one could be a laugher in the Gators' favor. But I don't really trust the defense to prevent those from happening, which would end up keeping this game close throughout. Missouri just took Georgia down to the wire, making Stetson Bennett look average in a way that Oregon certainly never figured out how to do. Is that because the Bulldogs overlooked the Tigers? Or is it because Missouri can get pressure that makes a quarterback uncomfortable if the opponent can't run the ball effectively? I think it's the former. Why do I say that? Well, if we go to one of my favorite stats, post-game win percentage, that measures what would happen if a game was played again with the same statistical profile, Georgia is projected to win the game 100% of the time. That is because using the stat predicted points added PPA, Missouri was at 0.025 for the game, while Georgia was at 0.303 on a per play basis. Mizzou's success rate was at 28% compared to 48% for Georgia. If you like more traditional stats, Georgia outgained Missouri 481 to 294. So why was the game close? Well, the first reason is that Georgia lost 2 fumbles in the first half, one leading directly to a Missouri field goal. The second is that the Tigers only gave up 2 explosive plays until the final 2 Georgia drives. Basically, they were able to keep Georgia in front of them and force field goals. You can see that in their opportunity-based stats, as Georgia didn't score much when in Missouri territory, 9 points in its first 5 scoring chances. But eventually, the Tigers' defense broke. They surrendered 14 points in the Bulldogs' last 2 scoring chances. That wasn't a coincidence. Georgia finally was able to get some chunk plays, totaling 4 explosive plays on those 2 drives. So what we have is a 2-3 team with a quarterback who struggles to get to his second read, coming off an emotional loss in a game that they had no right to be in, but somehow managed to be. 11 points is a lot. Florida's only averaged 27 points per game this year, so if the odds makers are correct, that would put Florida at something like a 27-14 win. I don't think the Gators are only giving up 14 points to just about anyone right now. But I also don't think they're only going to score 27 points if Anthony Richardson remains hot. I suspect that the last 2 games have given him confidence to come out and light the Missouri defense up. After all, this is the same team that gave up 40 points to Kansas State, who has a dual threat quarterback, Adrian Martinez, who is much more of a runner than a thrower. Richardson's a better player than him. And the Gators win 42-24. Well, that's my take on Florida, Missouri. Hopefully I'm sure that'll make Gator fans happy, obviously, with who I'm picking there and picking in a big way. Look, I think Anthony Richardson is the key here. I think that's pretty clear from the article, but also pretty clear for anybody who's watched this team. This team is going to go as he goes. The 2 games that he's played poorly in, Florida's really struggled. The 3 games he's played well in, Florida's been in every one. Every game in the Napier era thus far against everybody other than Eastern Washington's been a 1-score game. So certainly picking the Gators to win by more than 11 makes this sort of break that mold. But the other thing is, if you see what happened last year with Louisiana, Louisiana sort of got off to a slow start. They were able to win. They lost to Texas to open the season, and then they really struggled even against some teams that FCS teams very low in FBS. And played a bunch of close games. And about halfway through the year, things started to turn around. They started to really put some distance between them and their opponents. Is this team going to be able to do that? I don't necessarily know, but I do think that Florida's a better team than Missouri. I think Florida's a more talented team than Missouri. I think the game's at the Swamp. And so you start combining all of those different things together, and I think it becomes pretty clear why Florida's an 11-point favorite. So, coming in, I thought this was going to be like a 3-4 point game, and picking Florida was just going to really kind of be picking the win. But as I've looked more into some of the advanced stats, as I've looked more into what I expect, and quite honestly, the only game I had watched coming into this one of Missouri was the game against Georgia. And obviously that one was really close. That one sort of makes you go, whoa, all right, this team has that capability. Do they have the capability to do it 2 weeks in a row? I think that's the question. And I think that's the thing that everybody's doubting. So, look, appreciate you coming here, listening to the article. If you want the clips, if you want to read more, you can go over to readandreaction.com. Check it out over there. Certainly, if you want to support us more, we appreciate that. Patreon.com/readandreaction. Until next time, go Gators.